Thank you. I will call this meeting to order at 10:01. Linda would like to read the land acknowledgement.
The city of Thorold is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Durrunk, Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The city of Thorold stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wide stewardship of the lands on which we live.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Are we talking about the Monroe House at all today, Nick?
No, the only update was just that it's headed towards council, so you're good.
Okay, then any other declarations of interest? Nope, okay. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda, can I get a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda, please?
Before we get to that, can we amend the agenda?
Oh, right, yes. Sorry. We will amend the agenda. We will pull point 11 on the agenda to just after correspondence, because Mark has a presentation for us and he has to leave at 11. So with that in mind, can I have a mover? The councillor has moved. Can I have a seconder? Tom has seconded. All in favor? All right. Anyone opposed? No, then that is carried. Can I have a mover and a seconder on the adoption of the minutes of February 27th, please? Dave has moved. Mary has seconded. All in favor? All right. Anyone opposed? No, then that is carried as well. Correspondence. We have a new committee member. Jonathan Sharon. For those of you, I'll let you introduce yourself in just a minute. We have already, a lot of us know him already, but Jonathan, if you just want to say a few words, that would be great.
Just to say hello to everyone. It's great to be part of the committee. Obviously, I've been in Thorold my whole life. I've lived in 2 designated residences in Thorold. It's really something that I care deeply about, and that it's, I think, an important part of our community as well. And I'm just really glad to be here and be a part of it and do what I can. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. And by the way, well, Wynne and Linda are both basically neighbors of yours. They just live around the corner from you. Jonathan is in the parsonage on Welland Street. Okay, then we move on to our initial item 11, and here I'll give the mic over to Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really some information purposes. We've been having quite a few pre-consultation meetings at the staff level for proposed developments in Thorold. A couple that have come up in the last couple of months that I wanted to bring to the attention of committee. The first being 21 Pine Street South. So these are the lands situated immediately south of the Trinity United Church. So we received a conceptual drawing from the owner of the property for a 16-unit apartment structure. That apartment structure was to be situated, and Justin, I don't know if you have the site plan. No, okay. So the conceptual drawing had the 16-unit apartment situated to the rear of the property with the parking up at the front. Staff suggested to the proponent that we would want to see the building brought up towards the street with parking in the rear. But we also wanted to talk about the cultural heritage assessment that we think is necessary for this property. And it's more of a general discussion that I want to have with the committee about this. You know, the developer was hesitant to move the property forward because he thought it would impact on the church adjacent and would take away from its prominence And so I wanted to kind of put that on the committee's radar and just get a sense from committee what their thoughts were, just general thoughts are, because I think we do still need to do a cultural heritage assessment on the property. But I do want to give kind of a direction to the proponent. Like I say, our direction from staff perspective, looking at the planning principles, is we would want to see the building brought up to the streetscape. We think it's more appropriate. But I want to be able to kind of give the developer that direction, or whatever direction the committee believes, because again, the question came up of the prominence of the Trinity United Church as well. So I guess I'd open the floor. I'd welcome any sort of feedback that folks have. I think we can probably throw up a conceptual drawing here.
Yeah, do.
I personally have seen it, but if we can get it up on the,
There
here
we
it
go.
is.
Perfect. Thank you,
Yeah.
Justin.
Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mark. Mark, what's the setback as per bylaw in that location? The side yard setback?
That's a very good question. I believe there's a landscape buffer of 1.2 meters on that side, on that north side. So it is very, very close. And I believe the aisle on the Trinity United Church is right up against the lot line. I don't know if there's any grass in between.
Okay. I agree that it probably would be better if the building was closer to the road rather than set so far back and we had to look at a parking lot.
When I looked at this site plan, my first reaction was exactly the same. Why is it set back? We just had a case come up before the Committee of Adjustment about a building on Front Street that is exactly that, and that was the worst decision ever made, to have a parking lot facing Front Street. I can see where the developer is coming from in this case, because if the parking were in the back, how would you get to the parking? You can see the lot is very narrow, so the whole concept of the building would have to be changed in order to get cars to pass by it. I was not aware that staff had already their second thoughts about the parking lot being in the front. Generally, I would prefer that the building be at the front and the parking lot in the back. In that case, the building being next to a historic building, it has to look, its look has to be sympathetic to the heritage building, and very important heritage building right next to it. If it were decided that that parking lot stays in the front for whatever reasons, I had already made notes for myself that I would like to see a landscape barrier with hedging and trees in the front that camouflages the parking lot. The building itself doesn't seem to be terribly intrusive. I think it's only 3 stories high. Is that correct, Mark? Or is it 4?
I believe it's 4, Madam Chair. And just to your point, so the discussion that we had regarding moving the property up to the front, putting the property at the rear would require a council decision.
Yeah.
It would require an official plan amendment and a rezoning to do so, because the directive in our official plan is to basically pull that building up to the front. From a planning perspective, we thought there were a couple of different ideas, and it would look at a redesign of the building. One is to allow kind of take out a couple of units on the ground floor and allow a tunnel to go through to the rear. Yep. The second conceptual idea was to approach the church and talk about perhaps an easement to access the property to the rear for parking. Again, not ideal, but again, we're just kind of spitballing ideas at this point, talking about different concepts and different ideas to get us to a design that we think is desirable.
Yeah.
And the desirable impact, at least from the staff's perspective, is to have that building brought up to the front.
Yeah.
So So those are two kind of concepts. We're obviously open to any other ideas that folks might have, but those are the first two ideas that were brought to the attention of the developer, and they'll have to make an ultimate decision as to what that building would do. We can't refuse to take an application if they decide that they want to go with this, but all we can do is tell them what staff can support. And ultimately, it would be a decision of council, but there would be inputs, obviously, from this committee as well about that.
Yeah. Yes, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mark again. Mark, isn't it automatically required to do a heritage impact study when it's right beside a designated heritage property?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, absolutely. It's a little different when it's on the same site, which is, we were dealing with Front Street, I think, at the last committee meeting, and that was a little bit different, where it gives us kind of a little bit of wiggle room. But when we're talking about an adjacent property, absolutely.
So are you still asking for this committee to support that, or?
Well, this committee would most likely demand that in this case. The last case on Front Street was a bit different in that the development on that heritage site was completely out of sight from street level, whereas this is not. This is right at the street. And I totally agree with you, Mark. On a downtown street, we shouldn't be facing a parking lot. So if there is a better solution, I'd much prefer that. And whether it's a tunnel going through the building itself, or whether the owners of the church can be persuaded to let that driveway of theirs be used for that apartment building, you know, if that, what I would like to see, though, is a facade of that building that is in keeping with and doesn't distract or in any way negatively impact Trinity United. Yes.
And through you, Madam Chair, just, yeah, we're not, staff isn't requesting whether or not a cultural heritage assessment is required. We believe it is required. It's a question of what inputs the staff or the committee would like to see. And if it is bringing the building forward and creating a facade that is architecturally sympathetic, those are the types of inputs that we can provide to the developer and moving forward with that cultural heritage assessment.
Okay. Linda?
The church has had structural problems before. That's why it couldn't be sustained and had to be sold. But I'm just wondering if this building will do anything to cause more structural problems to the church, because if you're digging in the ground for foundations and stuff, will that hurt the church and the building itself and make it less viable? Because it's had problems before, they've been fixed, but is there any possibility that building so close to this building would cause some more problems with the heritage structure?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mark?
and through you, Madam Chair, it's a great question. Typically what we will see, even in a cultural heritage assessment, is they will ask for a pre-development survey to be done on the property. So they will take pictures of the church, the foundations, the inside, and ensure that they will do a pre and then a post-development survey. So any impacts on the church property would be picked up through that assessment.
Okay. Linda, do you have another comment? Your hand is still up.
Yes, I left it up. Okay, once the damage is done, it's done. So I think we need, and would that company be responsible for further renovations or
Repair.
fixes, so to speak, to that church building? Because it was a very expensive structure to actually fix in the first place. And would this company that's building beside it that might cause the problems, and if there are problems, would they be responsible for the fixing of those problems? to the heritage structure.
Yeah, and through you, Madam Chair, I believe that's the intent of the pre-survey or the pre-development survey, is to get a status of what that actually looks like. And then they would be responsible for any damage that was done to the property, because there would be a post-development survey done as well. So you would look at the differences and hopefully there aren't any, but if there were some, I believe it would become more of a legal matter than anything to review that. And Nick, I don't know if you have any other offerings on that side of things, but that's how I've seen them happen in the past.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, often what we'll have, if there's a property adjacent to a development property, and it's a significant heritage building, as is this, there is typically something built into the heritage assessment as a follow-up that's almost like you described, like a pre-construction monitoring. But often they'll be part of, it's usually called like a protection plan that sets out things to take care of when the building is undergoing development beside it. Like even just protecting from construction equipment, inadvertently backing up into a building, and things like fencing, or if there is, the use of vibration and things like that, that it's there's measures put in place to ensure that it's not beyond a certain level. So there's a number of things that could be looked after as part of a protection plan for an adjacent building. So I would think there'd be something like that built into the study that's done, just to ensure there are no issues created.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Win first, and then Linda again.
Through the chair, I'm just wondering what would be the timeline for the post-development assessment? Because I'm just thinking, would there potentially be issues that are a result of the construction that aren't immediately apparent, that might happen months down the road? Like, what does the timeline for that look like, and how do we determine if there were structural issues to the building or some other issues? How can we determine if it was a result from the construction of 21 Pine or not?
Nick, I don't know if you have any expertise on just timing of post-development. I think it's a perfectly valid question that Wynn's just asked. I just rely on your expertise on that one, maybe.
Sure. It's usually when the development is done. So once construction is complete, then that's when there'd be another assessment done. At least the ones I've seen, it's usually whenever you're done, it's like you go in, make sure everything is okay, and then there's a sign off that's obtained after that. Sometimes there's a letter of credit that goes with it that the developer puts up, and that's returned once they've confirmed there's no adjacent damage.
Okay, just 1 second, Linda. Does that mean after the development is completely done? Because a lot of the work that has to be done on an apartment building would then not impact the ground as much anymore as digging the foundation and putting in the first framework. So months could theoretically go by, maybe even half a year before the building is actually finished. And the greatest impact on the structure on the other lot would probably come from digging the foundation. So is it possible that there would be a substantial time frame between the post-construction survey and the first survey?
I think there certainly could be. It would be up to the whoever's preparing the report to set out what the schedule would be for when the when it would be scheduled to take a look at the building.
Okay, Linda.
I just wondered if there would be ongoing monitoring while this building is being constructed of the heritage structure. That's one question. And the second question is, I find that probably you need to have ongoing monitoring of the heritage structure for a few years, I would think, after the construction is done, because we live on the top of the escarpment, and it's clay, and clay moves. And so I think it would be appropriate for the structure, the heritage structure, to be monitored for a number of years, because it might not happen right away, but it might happen 5 years down the road or so. Just a thought that it could happen, and I wouldn't want to see the heritage structure damaged.
Yes, Mark?
Through you, Madam Chair, just a couple of points. I think one is, I think that is a discussion that we can have certainly with the developer. Concerns would be tying up financing for long periods of time from a developer's perspective. But we would also rely on the heritage expertise that's provided in terms of what they believe a reasonable impact time is. There are people that have greater experience than I on heritage matters and would understand just how long it is reasonable for an impact to occur. I think the second point that I wanted to make is actually by pulling that property or that building up to the front, it is actually moving it further away from the church, which I think is another kind of feather in our cap, so to speak, to say that it should maybe minimize. It won't get rid of any potential impact on the adjacent property, but it will minimize given where we're proposing that structure to be. So it's moving away from it. So I think that was the second thought from a staff perspective, is moving it to the front can minimize or kind of limit some of the damage that could be done if the building was situated at the rear.
That's what was actually a question I was just going to ask you, whether that top gray line there is the outline of the church, which I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah, which means if we move that apartment building to the front, then it's not right beside the church anymore. The corners would still be the same distance from each other, but not the entire dig out for the apartment building. That is definitely a point in favor of building towards the front rather than the back.
Just through you, Madam Chair, the moving again of that structure was the concern of the developer was, does that take away from the prominence of the Trinity United Church, because it may block the vista of the church from being seen because it is set back. And that again is more of a discussion question for the committee at large. In the estimation of staff, we would much rather see it pulled forward for a number of reasons. But again, if committee thought that perhaps it was a better situation to allow for the vista to kind of remain intact, then we can have some discussion and dialogue, and that would also be an input that we would provide to council ultimately.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, if the entire area in front of the building were parkland, then of course we would have a nice vista. If it's a parking lot, we just have a view onto the church, not necessarily a good one. And as I said earlier, what it basically depends on, if the building is up at the front and blocking the church partially when you're coming from the south, it depends a lot on what that building looks like. Whether it impacts the church negatively. I mean, the city's buildings are growing. They're not as small anymore as they once were. We have to accept that the views onto some buildings will not be the same anymore as they once were. We want our streetscape look as attractive as possible, however, and that means we have to keep our heritage structures in mind, and the buildings that go up have to be sympathetic and in keeping and not having a negative impact on that structure and with that on the neighborhood. Any other comments? Linda, do you have, Tom.
No, I'm sorry, I should take that down now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the proposed structure there and the footprint of the church, what is the approximate distance between the proposed structure and the existing church?
Through Madam Chair, I don't have that calculation in front of me. Typical aisle width is about 6 meters, so I would, on a ballpark, I would say it's about 7 or 8 meters separation
In total,
in total.
about 20 feet, approximately, 20,
Yeah,
21 feet.
20, 25 feet.
Okay, thank you.
We should also mention there is a building, there's various buildings on that site right now. It's not as if this is an empty lot. So the distance from the church is really the driveway of beside the church to the back of the property where the church's parking is located. And then there's a tiny little strip that you can see above the diagonally striped outlines of that new building, which they call landscaping. Of course, is very narrow. So it will be fairly close, but this is downtown. So we probably have to accept that. It is quite close right now, too. It's an old house with multiple additions and outbuildings in the back on the lot right now. So what this would do is would be one building, apartment building, with a parking lot. I agree with the city, it would be more attractive if the parking lot were not in the front. But I still would like to see something that works with a proper downtown environment and within keeping of a heritage structure right next to it.
Through you, Madam Chair, one last point that I wanted to make. The idea, the concept of having kind of a, for lack of a better term, a tunnel going through the building will also increase the cost of the construction of that building. So the developer has suggested that instead of a four-story apartment, they may need to go to a 5 or a 6-story apartment to offset the cost of that design, which is why we've looked at other ideas and concepts for access to parking. And again, I think that's another question that, you know, we would have to get into with the developer if the design of the building was modified. And again, we may come back to the committee just to talk about height issues as well, perhaps. But you know, the site obviously to the south has quite a bit of height, and so I think it would be generally in keeping with the height of the lands to the south, if they did have to go up another story or two. So
that's 5 stories, though, the one to the south, and 6 stories is still one higher at the front and then really blocking. But again, has the church already been approached about a possible sharing of the driveway?
Through Madam Chair, I don't believe that's taken place at this point.
Okay. Linda, you have another question?
I don't have a question. I have a statement, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but I certainly hope that the building will be much more reflective, a sympathetic structure to the church and to the heritage of the church building, because the building, in my way of thinking, across from the new McDonald's area is rather square and chunky, and I think it's not a very attractive building at all. I could use stronger words, but I won't in this committee. And I would hope that the next structure that's next to the church would be much more attractive and sympathetic in design to the church, so that there is a better streetscape.
Thank you. Any other comments?
My opinion, yeah.
Thank you. It's
Sorry.
appreciated, Linda. Thank you.
I had to do that.
Jonathan?
I was just going to say, in terms of the building being there, this vista doesn't really exist, because that house is right up onto the road, is it not?
Yeah.
The current.
Very much so, yeah.
I mean, it's not as big as this building, it's a residence, but, I mean, they're kind of saying to something which isn't the current situation. It's like a new ideal that they're kind of alluding to. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Thank you. Mark?
Through Madam Chair, I think it's a perfectly valid point. I think when you look at height, you get into massing issues too of what the feel is from the street, and if it is being brought right up to the lot line, there is obviously an impact, right? When you build a 4 or a 5 or a 6-story building, there's a massing impact. So there's ways to alleviate that a little bit by staggering the building back and whatnot. So I think the inputs that everyone is providing today is exactly what we're looking for. So I appreciate the comments, that you're providing. I think this is exactly kind of the inputs that I want to provide to any heritage consultant that would be looking at doing something on this property.
Okay. One last comment to this still. If this building became much bigger than it is right now, I think they're going to run into parking issues. Right now, there's only one parking spot provided per unit, which is already less than actually called for, as far as I know. It's supposed to be 1.25. So if there were more units than 16 in this building, where would the parking be?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's a very good question. And again, they would likely be in front of council for some sort of relief from the provisions of the bylaw, maybe even the official plan. Because the other issue is there's no ground floor commercial at this point.
Yeah.
That would require an official plan amendment. So the residential can be situated to the rear and above a commercial use. So that's the other concept that staff is discussing as well, is in order to avoid an official plan amendment, they would need to include some ground floor commercial as well. So there's a lot of moving parts with this one, for sure.
Okay. We would prefer commercial on the first floor.
Duly noted.
Okay. Any other comments on this issue? No? Okay, then we'll move on. Oh, one more comment from Mark?
No more comments. Just on the next piece that I wanted to discuss is the Trinity United Church, funny enough. So we did a pre-consultation with the new owners. So there are 2 nonprofit organizations that purchased that property. And essentially what they're looking at doing is renovating everything other than the church. Mm-hmm. So the rear area, they want to convert into offices. So it would be kind of a 2-phased approach. They are looking to maintain the church as is for now. They're looking at that as kind of a phase 3. But what they want to do is actually utilize it for community purposes. And so it's a good news piece, I think, from our perspective. It has gone through site plan control. They are going to need a rezoning application because it is a new institutional use. So it's going from a church to a nonprofit office sort of use. So that requires a relief from the zoning bylaw. But again, they are staying within the footprint of the existing structure. What they are proposing on doing is there's an existing staircase on the south side of the building, which would they want to enclose that. So that's the only exterior renovation that they would be looking for at this point. And then in phase 2, in the gymnasium space, they would look to put in a elevator for access purposes. So again, a very good news piece from our perspective. With that, we had asked obviously about a cultural heritage assessment for the property. Again, because it is on the same property, as there is some wiggle room for staff to not require a cultural heritage assessment. In our opinion, because we are talking about leaving the heritage property, and there's just interior renovations, we don't think that a cultural heritage assessment is really required at this time. But I did want to get feedback from committee on that point as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the development. If I can answer them, I'll be more than happy to.
I've actually been in contact with Dave, is it, from the church, and also, I've only had one email correspondence with Margaret, I think, Margaret Beaupre. And what they suggest sounds all very good. I don't think they touch the heritage building at all at this point, even though, according to the designation bylaw, I think they are even allowed to change the interior, just not the exterior. But at this point, they only look at renovating the basement and the additions in the back, which are not part of the designated structure. And if there's no exterior changes at all, then I don't think, I put this to the committee too, but I don't think a heritage impact assessment is necessary in this case. And if they wanted to at one point do alterations to the back additions to that church, then all we would have to see is a plan, drawings of what that would look like, and then we can decide whether an assessment is necessary or not. But those additions are not particularly attractive. So any future alterations certainly is something that we can discuss with them. Any comments? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mark. Mark, I certainly support not requiring an HIS in this instance because of the fact that it's, as you pointed out, interior renovation. I just want to add as well that I'm pleased that they're looking at the restoration of that back building instead of a tear down, which, as we've spoken about before, would just end up in landfill. So good for them for working with what they have, and I, as I mentioned, don't think it would require the HIS, so I would support that.
Any other comments? No? Yes?
Just one last comment on that is very similar to what we did on Front Street by stating that there's no requirement for a cultural heritage assessment on this development. It doesn't presuppose that you wouldn't require one if future work was done on this property. Yeah. So I also wanted to make that clear to the committee is if they are looking at doing other forms of development on that property, we still have the opportunity to ask for a cultural heritage assessment. Just at this point, and given what they're proposing, staff is of the opinion that it's not really going to impact on that element right now.
Okay, great, thanks. Do you have any other ones?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, I think I'm done for the day.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Okay, then we will move on to the next item, invoices for payment. I have been advised by planning that Sarah's report on the William Stable House was paid. Beaver Dam's book sales. Justin has sent me some suggestions for the future that these books, to make payment for them and also the transferal of those payments into the Heritage Emergency Fund as easy as possible. They should be sold through the city either at Lock 7 once that option is available. Right now it is not, but hopefully will be in the future, and maybe also at City Hall. We have also discussed that the books would make great gifts or prizes when there's raffles or city giveaways at city events. We just donated one at a event at the Senior Center last Friday, or Friday a week ago. Tom and I did another event at the Senior Center. And the city donated one of the books as one of the door prizes at the end. So whenever there's a heritage event, whenever there's a city event, I think that's a great idea to offer one of these books as a prize. Then moving on to ongoing business. Properties, Beaver Dams Church, there's news. Councillor, right?
Maybe not just yet. There's a meeting Wednesday evening, so I'd prefer not to jump the gun.
Okay, all right. Then we leave that for now and move on to the Stone Store. There's nothing to discuss at this moment, but it will stay on our agenda due to the development that's happening behind. We voted on an issue, well, the issue that Mark just brought up a few minutes ago in the last meeting. Right now, there's nothing else to add, but let's just keep it on the agenda, since this development, I would imagine, is going to happen in the next little while. Next item is the Flannery House, across the street from you, Win. Any developments there yet?
No signs of construction started, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on to the installation of history plaques for designated properties. We're probably still a little bit too early here, but that should happen very soon. The stone store, of course, still needs theirs attached to the side of the building. That will happen as soon as the weather is stable enough to get that done. And then I have had correspondence from both St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church and Trinity United Church that they very much would like a history plaque on their properties. I have then answered to let me know when we can meet, first of all, to decide on the spot where it should be installed, and also to show them the wording that we came up with. Haven't heard back from either one of them yet. But as soon as I do hear from them, I will order those plaques, and then we'll have the city put them up whenever it's convenient. With Trinity United, we'll just see whether I don't think it would be in the way of their construction, because obviously the installation would happen close to Pine Street on the greenery patch in front of the church, and the construction would most likely happen in the back, and access to that, they have their laneways. So we'll discuss that with them directly, but as soon as they have gotten back to me, then those plaques will hopefully be sorted. Did you just have your, no? Go, okay. The next item, Monroe House, we don't have to talk about today. Heritage, and the next one, Heritage Permit Status Update. Anything new, Nick, about that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, nothing new to report on heritage permits as of yet.
All right, thank you. There's also no news to my knowledge regarding the downtown facade program. Then moving on to new business, Trinity United Church, we just talked about. The Williams Dable House, 82 Welland Street North, that is our next designation project, or the one that we're working on right now. We don't have a meeting until May, so I'd like to discuss right now the process of getting the designation going. The owners would like to see a designation at the end of the summer, so end of August, beginning of September. So I think the best way to proceed would be to give notice of motion. I have my list of council meetings in front of me here, and we have to time that correctly. If we gave notice of motion on May 7th, and City Council would then pass or give notice of intent to designate on May 28th, that would mean 30 days have to elapse before the bylaw can be passed, which would be on July 9th. And then another 30 days will have to go by to give anybody the chance to go to the OLT and protest that decision if they were so inclined. Does that sound okay? Well, that means the we could designate the building sometime mid-August to mid-September. By then it should be done, because there's a time frame during which it has to be done. Any comments with regard to that? No? Nick, I have a quick question to you. Who drafts the designation bylaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the last one, it was a team effort between myself and clerks and using material from the report that was prepared for it.
Okay.
So we could do something similar. I could work with clerks on a draft and then circulate that to the committee to take a look at.
Okay. Would you like me to
then we'll go
provide a list of the most important points that Sarah made in her conclusion or something to make it easier on you, or are you okay with just using her report?
That would be great if you could provide some information too, and then that'll just help speed things along.
Okay, great, will do.
Okay.
All right. Councillor, does that sound all right, that you give notice of motion that we would like a notice of intent passed? So you would give notice of motion on May 7th and notice of intent on May 28th? Okay.
That would work.
Okay, great. All right. Moving on. Oh, information sessions for real estate agents. Win and I are just now working on a PowerPoint. The real estate agent that I have been in contact with is looking, last time I got a note from him at an event in April that could still be pushed forward depending on how the renovations are going in their offices. Offices are in St. Catharines. He is a Thorold resident though. And he also owns one of the designated buildings here in Thorold. The presentation will be a short rundown on just the importance of heritage, similar to what we did to council last year. However, we'll leave out the Thorold specific things and just do it more generally according to heritage buildings. And then the second part will be to give them points in order to most efficiently and best sell heritage designated structures, to let them know what is involved so that they can let their clients know what is involved, but also to diffuse some of the myths around heritage designations so that clients are not scared to buy such a building because they think they can never do anything with it. So we think it's very important that the real estate community is educated about that and also educates their clients. And I also think it's important to let them know that preservation of any form is highly, highly desirable these days. We need to be sustainable. So even if a building is not designated, a new owner should maybe know that the materials in a 150-year-old structure, if it's in good place, are most likely of vastly superior quality than any new build. And I've been dealing with wood during my entire career, and I built very high-end furniture. I only use the top-end materials. There's no comparison with anything you can buy nowadays that is the same quality as first growth lumber that is used in our heritage buildings. So people should be aware of that tearing down and replacing is not always the right way to go. You can have a modern lifestyle in an old building. So that will hopefully happen in April, but, and we won't have another meeting before then, obviously, but I'll have a report on it next time we meet. Moving on to our work plan, designation priorities. Oh, Dave, yes,
sorry. Just one question. I think that's a great thing. Could we make up a package for any real estate agent that's concerned to
yes,
spread it around? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
super.
That was a few months ago. I sent around a list, well, basically sort of a blurb for real estate agents, what to keep in mind. What we would like to do is to make sure that this gets circulated to every real estate office in the city. So they have it when a heritage building comes onto their desk, they know this is something that the client needs to know.
Perfect, great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. where are we? Designation priority, single properties. We are very close, hopefully, to announce our next designation project. However, I don't have a signature yet, so I do not want to announce the house or the address. I don't think that's right. I will hopefully be able to do that at our next meeting. Now, this is a question for you, Justin. If we wanted to designate this building comfortably this year with a designation happening in September or October, it would be nice to give notice of motion on June 18th. However, that is only less than 3 weeks after our next meeting. When we do that, it would be nice to already have our research report done. If I might get the okay from the owner in the next 2 weeks, there's 5 people in the room who know which house that is. And can I commission the research report from Sarah before our next meeting, or do we need to pass a motion during the meeting in order for me to do that?
Why can't we pass one now?
Well, some of you don't know which house it is. Will you just trust me that
doesn't matter? We'll trust you for the house and pass the motion now, so that you've got the motion, you've got the committee's approval. You don't, and a formal approval.
Justin?
Can that be done?
Well, let's ask Justin. It is a no-brainer candidate. I just don't feel comfortable announcing which one it is without having their signature yet.
So normally, when we pass a motion, it says the address, and we know who it is, and members of the public will know who it is with these meetings being open to the public. I would recommend that we have it, which we don't have now. That's fine. It's kind of giving a blank check to pick on whatever property. So it'd be probably good to know the property, I think, would be my recommendation.
Yeah, but the reason why I said I wanted to spare you an emergency meeting. I can also ask for a 15-minute meeting to pass the motion once I have the okay.
I do appreciate sparing that, but...
So that's what we should do?
Just to be on the safe side, that probably is a better idea.
Then that's what we'll do. We'll keep it very short. Okay. All right, then we won't talk any further about that, but in a few weeks, I might just ask you to just meet for 15 minutes to pass the motion on that. Next one, heritage districts. Nick, it's been going through, I know we have discussed it multiple times before, and it's always in the back of my mind. I would just like your input. How realistic is it for us to try and designate heritage districts? I'm thinking particularly about our downtown Front Street area. There's about 40, if we are looking at the length between Claremont Street and Regent Street, I think Regent Street, there's about 40 properties there. 4 or 5 of them are already designated. There should be, I think, 8, is it 25 or 20% that have to pass the requirements of designation in order to facilitate a heritage district?
It is 25% based on the new Heritage Act now.
Yeah.
And it's 25% of the properties that have to satisfy the 9 criteria under the Act.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that 25% need to be designated.
Yeah.
It just means that through the study that's done, 25% would satisfy at least 2 criteria.
Yeah. And also I'd like to point out, I'm not saying this because I want to halt any particular development that's already underway right now. There is one in particular I know of It is one of our oldest buildings on Front Street, and I know it's not savable. I think it has already gone too far. That is not the intention here. I would just like to see the downtown to stay a small town, retain its character, because there are going to be economic opportunities lost if we don't, and an identity loss, a loss of sense of place. And the more we tear down, the higher the environmental impact is that we cause. So as much as we can preserve would be great. That doesn't mean we can't develop on the sites if there's room and add to it, but to designate certain areas in Thorold as heritage districts would certainly help in managing development in a way that is good in the long term and not something that is rushed through and is regretted later. So that's why I'd like your input, how realistic is it to actually succeed with this?
So it's certainly a larger type of a project to undertake a heritage district. I'm sure everyone's aware, but it's designating an area under Part 5 of the Heritage Act. So it's similar to the Part 4 designations, but it's just a different scope in that you're looking at the area and the character and things like that. So they're done in two phases. You've got the Heritage Conservation District study, and then if that's approved by council, then you have a Heritage Conservation District plan that is done, and that would actually put in place the types of policies and guidelines to help manage change. The Heritage Act has certain things you have to look at when you're looking at a Heritage Conservation District. It's a project that's typically done by a consulting team as opposed to something that's done by the committee. So that means you need to get council budget for a certain type of project. So it's not something that the committee can just decide to do. It needs to be something that's got budget and council support, and it's something that's in the work plan for the planning department. So if it's something that's of interest, which it is, of course, then it probably makes sense for the committee to think about potential areas. I know you mentioned the downtown stretch. If there's other areas that could be considered for a district, that might be good to have some areas that you're thinking or looking at. Maybe decide on a priority, and that could be the downtown. And then it would make sense then to put that in the hopper for budget for next year. The one thing I'll mention too, it's really important to have a good basis for a study area. So it's important to take time to clearly identify at least a starting point. The study area is always refined through the process anyway, but it's if you have a good starting point, then that really helps to just to focus on an area. So if it's a historic plan, or if you mentioned, if it is really just the street frontage, things like geographic boundaries really help. So sometimes you've got a rail line that defines the one boundary of the area, or water or something like that, or some major roads that really start to frame an area. So I think that's important to do for sure. And then once you've landed on the study area, then I think it would make sense. Then that goes to planning, and then puts it forth as budgeted for next year.
Thank you very much.
No
yes,
problem.
Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Nick. Nick, is it possible that you could forward the committee the documents required from the bylaws that state the steps and stages required to obtain this status? That would be very helpful.
Sure. I could put together just kind of a bullet point summary of some key things. And there's the parts of the Heritage Act, and of course there's the Ontario Heritage Toolkit, which has a section talking about heritage conservation districts. So it's got some good background, and I could certainly do that.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? No? Okay. Moving on to info events and fairs. One of our next ones will actually be Earth Day. I contacted Joe from the Environment Committee and asked him whether we can have a table at the Earth Day event, and I'm putting together a flyer that will be specifically printed out, very simple, for that event, just emphasizing the environmental impact of construction and demolitions and the advantages of preserving rather than tearing down and building new. A lot of people who might be very green-oriented, especially young people, might not think about that the modern pad that is their dream home has environmental impact. So education, again, that preserving old buildings does not just preserve beautiful old architecture, but our planet as well, is a message that we should get out. So we will be there. I will be there. If anybody is interested in joining me, please let me know. It doesn't have to be right now, but we'll talk about it when it gets closer to it. I think it's in April. When is Earth Day again, Tim?
April 22nd.
April 22nd, okay. It's on that weekend. Joe will let me know what the process will be. I don't know yet whether we'll have to pay a fee or anything or bring our own table, but I think it's important that we be there. Justin?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's April 20th, Saturday. Okay. And also, you may want to reach out to Jeff Holman as well, since it's a city planned event, so you might need to reach out to him as well, just in case, to make sure you organize it with him, since they'll be setting up the vendors and so on as well. And then it's with input from the Environment Committee. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Sorry about that. That's the first one. Then, of course, as we've already talked about, the weekly market, once it opens up again. I have been assured we can have a table as often as we want, once or twice, maybe sharing with the city, and otherwise we can have our own. We can then, once it gets closer to it, talk about whether we want to be there every single time or every second week. Maybe we'll also make it dependent on the weather. It's maybe not a great idea to come on a rainy day when people aren't coming out. I believe, is that correct, Councillor, that we can decide that very short notice whether we'll be there that night?
Yes, I mean, within reason.
Okay, all right. I'll be there as often as I can. If others want to volunteer and man the table sometimes, that will be great. So let me know once it gets closer to it. Then next one, info events for owners of potential designation candidates. This is something that Mayor Ugolini brought to me at this event at the Senior Center last week. We were talking about designations, also why it takes so long sometimes, because, it sometimes is just difficult persuading owners to go that route. And he suggested, why don't you do an info evening for owners of historic properties that are not designated yet, or whoever who wants to come on that particular date, and give them a presentation what it means to designate and what it doesn't mean. I think that's a great idea. Hopefully we'll get an audience, but let's work towards that and get that. That's for sometime later in the year, and just get the word out there that it's not scary to designate your house. And then, of course, this coming November is the bicentennial of the turning of the sod. There are no city events planned at this time. St. Catharines and the other cities along the canal are planning celebrations for the ribbon cutting of the Welland Canal, which is not until which wasn't until 5 years later. So these big celebrations won't happen until then. But the first shovel went into the ground in Thorold, and I think that's worth commemorating. So how about forming a working group over the next 2 months to come up with a plan for a small celebration of the very beginning of the Welland Canal, which happened here in Thorold in Allenburg. This could include the setting of a plaque that just commemorates the 200-year anniversary. According to Tom, this first shovel was dug very close to the cairn by the Allenburg Bridge. Don't know whether we can narrow it down even more where exactly it was happening. But to plant a commemorative plaque would be maybe a nice thing. We could invite, obviously, our mayor, our regional councillor, any councillors who want to come, Vance Badaway and Jeff Birch, if they have time to celebrate this, and then maybe we could have a short celebration at the Allenburg Community Center. I suggested a champagne reception. I was turned down by the councillor who said the city would probably not go for an alcohol-based event, but maybe we could do sort of tea and treats or whatever, and we could get some volunteers who bake some things or make some little sandwiches and have some tea and just commemorate the event and that part of our heritage. So it was actually the councillor who suggested the working group. Would anybody be interested in maybe Tom? Thank you very much. Anybody who would like to join Tom with...
Linda would.
Linda would? Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor, you would like to? Or do you want to say something? Or you join the working group? Okay. Okay, now we already have 5 for the working group. Dave, Mary, Linda, Tom, and the councillor. Is that too many?
Yes, that's too many. You need less than quorum, so we need no more than 5.
Oh, okay, so the councillor won't be part of the working group. So Mary, Dave, Linda, and Tom. And if you want to come up with a wording for a possible plaque, that doesn't say exactly the same what is on the cairn right now, but something different, and also maybe emphasizes that this is 200 years since and that it happened there. That would be great. And whatever else you can come up to, you can inform us of everything at the next meeting then. Does that sound okay? All right, Justin?
So through you, Madam Chair, we'll just need a mover and a seconder to form a working group. And the members I have to confirm is Tom, Linda, Mary, and Dave.
All right. Can I have a mover and a seconder to move? I have the councillor moving. Can I have a seconder? Jonathan has seconded. So do we form a working group with these 4 members, Mary, Dave, Tom, and Linda, to prepare something for the turning of the sod celebrations in the fall? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? No? Then that is carried. Great. Thank you very much, and looking forward to hearing back from you. Moving, do we need any other comments to the turning of the sod with regards to that? No? Okay. Moving on, new official plan. I assume, I haven't heard anything. I assume there's no news yet. Have you heard anything, Nick?
No news yet.
Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is 21 Pine Street South. We've already discussed that. Then we can move on to roundtable discussion. I start with you, Tom. Would you like to say something?
Actually, in your comment about where the actual location was of the turning of the sod in Ellenburg, we have to think back 200 years ago, and it was just basically a ditch that was dug for these ships at that time. And it's probably in the middle of the canal. Yeah, so that's my comment.
Well, did the first canal at that point have the same course as the present canal?
The canal from Port Robinson to Ellenburg, Ellenburg to Port Robinson, has followed basically the same path with each existing canal.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything else from you, Tom?
No.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to add that, Tom, I have hip waders. Meet you in the middle of the canal.
Ricardo?
I think it's a little deeper than that.
Nothing out at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wynn?
Nothing for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Nick?
Nothing else for me, thanks.
Thanks. Linda?
No,
Thank
nothing
you.
else.
Jonathan?
No, just great first meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Dave?
Nothing else at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mary?
Nothing else at this time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Justin?
Nothing to add here.
Thank you very much. I don't have anything to add either. Our next meeting will be held on May 28th, 2024, unless we have confirmation from our hopefully next designation candidate. In that case, I will call a short meeting in between.
And just to note, if we do have to call one, it can just be a virtual if it's only going to be a short one, if the committee is amenable to that.
Yeah, so if everybody's fine to just meet virtually for that, that's okay. Tom, I know you have hard time getting into a meeting virtually. Yeah, but yeah, you can come over to our place, you mean, so that you can be on our, yeah, good, all right. Okay, there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 11:13. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.